power-drunk cop, a legendary action star trying to eat in peace. The officer thought he could make an example of the quiet man in the corner. He had no idea he was about to become the example. The Iron Skillet Diner was a time capsule. Sunlight, thick with the dance of dust motes, streamed through the large front windows, illuminating the mint-green vinyl of the booths, each with its own story told in a roadmap of tiny cracks. In the corner, a jukebox sat silent, its chrome trim gleaming, waiting for a quarter. The air was a comforting blend of sizzling bacon, dark roast coffee, and the faint, sweet scent of pancake syrup, a smell that promised simple, honest satisfaction. This was exactly what Jason Statham sought. At 55, he moved with a quiet economy of motion that belied the explosive energy he was famous for on screen. He wore a snug, gray Henley shirt that hinted at the disciplined physique beneath it, a dark gray flat cap pulled low, and on his wrist, a rugged, unpretentious dive watch. He was just a man enjoying a moment of anonymity, a brief escape into the ordinary. He sat in a booth by the window, a plate of steak, 2 perfect sunny-side-up eggs, and a mound of crispy hash browns before him. The calm was a luxury. It was a luxury that was about to be shattered. Across the diner, a pack of uniformed officers held court, their laughter booming with an arrogance that curdled the peaceful atmosphere. They owned the space, their presence a declaration of dominance. At their center was Officer Marcus Thorne, a man built like a bulldog, with a thick neck and a meticulously trimmed goatee that did little to soften the raw entitlement in his eyes. He didn't just wear his uniform. He inhabited it like a second skin of pure authority. Thorne's gaze swept the room, a predator scanning for weakness, and it landed on Statham. He saw a quiet man, alone, his head slightly bowed over his meal, seemingly unimpressed by their display. To Thorne, this wasn't humility, it was a challenge. "Well, look what we have here," Thorne announced to his table, his voice a low growl meant to carry. He nudged his partner. "Looks like someone's practicing for a role. Maybe the transporter's day off?" A few of his colleagues snickered nervously. Statham didn't react. He simply sliced off a piece of steak, dipped it into the golden yolk of an egg, and brought it to his mouth, chewing with deliberate slowness. The lack of a response was gasoline on Thorne's ego-fueled fire. He pushed his chair back. "Hey, cue ball," he called out, his voice louder now, laced with mockery. "I'm talking to you. You get lost on your way to the 8-ball rack." Silence. Statham picked up his coffee cup. Thorne was on his feet now, sauntering over, his boots making heavy, rhythmic thuds on the linoleum floor. He loomed over the booth, casting a shadow that eclipsed the morning sun. "Got a problem, mate?" he asked, attempting a crude imitation of an English accent. Statham finally looked up, his eyes, famously intense, were startlingly calm. "No problem at all," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "I'm just trying to eat my breakfast. A cop is talking to you. Show some respect," Thorne snapped, his face reddening. "Respect is earned, not demanded," Statham replied, his gaze unwavering. "Now, if you don't mind, my food's getting cold." That was it. The quiet defiance, the utter refusal to be intimidated, was more than Thorne's fragile authority could bear. In a flash of unrestrained fury, he acted. Without warning, without justification, he lunged. His hand clamped onto the back of Statham's neck, and with a grunt of exertion, he slammed Jason Statham's face down into his breakfast plate. The diner fell into a collective, horrified silence. A fork clattered to the floor with a sound like a gunshot. The steak was shoved aside, the hash browns scattered, and the twin suns of the eggs burst, their liquid gold splashing across the table and smearing into Statham's hair and face. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Slowly, with a methodical grace that was terrifying in its control, Jason Statham lifted his head. A glistening strand of egg yolk traced a path down his cheek, dripping from the edge of his jaw. He didn't wipe it immediately. He let it hang there, a testament to the violation. His eyes, when they met Thorne's, were no longer calm. They were glacial, burning with a cold fire that promised a reckoning. Thorne, seeing that look, took an involuntary step back. He tried to mask his sudden unease with a blustering laugh. "What's the matter, tough guy? Can't take a little joke. A woman in a nearby booth whispered, her voice trembling, "Oh my God, that's Jason Statham." The name rippled through the diner like a shockwave. Statham picked up a napkin, carefully wiped the mess from his face, and folded the soiled paper, placing it precisely on the table. Then he stood up, his 5'10" frame seeming to tower over the much larger officer. He stepped out of the booth. "A joke." Statham's voice was barely a whisper, yet it cut through the silence, sharp as a razor. He moved closer, invading Thorne's personal space. The scent of coffee, steak, and something metallic, raw anger, hung between them. "You put your hands on me. You crossed the line." Thorne's bravado was cracking, but he held his ground. "What are you gonna do? Hit a cop? In front of all these witnesses?" He gestured around the room, but his swagger felt hollow. Statham leaned in, his lips almost touching Thorne's ear. "I don't need to lay a hand on you," he breathed, the words a chilling promise to end you. With that, he turned. He walked past Thorne, past the ruined breakfast, past the stunned faces of the other officers. He didn't run. He didn't storm out. He walked with a purpose that was more intimidating than any threat. As the diner door swung shut behind him, its glass pane reflected Thorne's face, a mask of bravado beginning to crumble into genuine fear. For a moment, silence reigned. Then a new sound emerged. A soft ping, then another, and another. The sound of smartphones. Videos being uploaded. The incident, captured from a dozen different angles, was hitting the internet. Thorne's smug grin evaporated. Later that night, sitting in the sterile quiet of his apartment, Thorne stared at his phone in disbelief. His name was a wildfire. Hashtag cop abuse. Hashtag Thorne. Hashtag Statham Diner. The headlines were brutal. Power-hungry cop assaults Jason Statham over breakfast. Viral video shows officer's unhinged attack on actor. The comments were a tidal wave of fury, calling for his badge, his job, his freedom. He hurled his phone against the wall, but the damage was done. And then, something worse arrived. A plain white envelope had been slipped under his door. No return address. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of high-quality paper. Printed on it was a crystal-clear still frame from one of the videos. The exact moment of impact, his face twisted in a snarl of rage. And looking up from the plate, undefeated and sharp as a shard of glass, were Jason Statham's eyes. Below the image, a short, typed message. "You took your shot. Now it's my turn. JS." By Monday morning, Officer Marcus Thorne's world had been systematically dismantled. The incident wasn't just a viral moment. It was a national scandal. Morning news shows played the clip on a loop, a panel of experts dissecting his every move, their commentary a scathing indictment of police brutality and unchecked ego. His attempt to frame it as a prank gone wrong was universally rejected. The department, facing a public relations nightmare, acted swiftly. Suspension without pay was immediate. Internal Affairs launched a formal investigation, and the mayor's office issued a public apology to Mr. Statham, calling Thorne's actions a disgrace to the uniform. But it was Statham's silence that gnawed at Thorne's soul. There are no press conferences, no threats of lawsuits, no angry statements. There was only the quiet void, a vacuum of information that his terrified mind filled with monstrous possibilities. The silence wasn't peace. It was the eerie calm before a hurricane. He had poked a bear, and now the bear had simply vanished into the woods to plan its attack. Thorne barricaded himself in his apartment, curtains drawn, phone silenced. Sleep was a foreign country. Every creak of the floorboards in the hallway was Statham's approach. Every shadow thrown by passing headlights was the silhouette of a man with unfinished business. He started carrying his off-duty firearm in the waistband of his sweatpants as he paced his living room. "He's just an actor," he'd whisper to the empty room, the words tasting like a lie. His own mind began to betray him, superimposing Statham's cinematic roles, the unstoppable driver, the lethal assassin, over the image of the quiet man in the diner. On Thursday night, desperate for a dose of normalcy, for the reassuring camaraderie of his own kind, Thorne drove to the Shield and Anchor, a downtown cop bar. He needed to feel the solid ground of his identity again. But as he pushed through the door, the familiar buzz of conversation died. Heads turned, then quickly turned away. Men he'd shared a patrol car with suddenly found their beer glasses fascinating. He walked to the bar, trying to project an air of nonchalance. "Beer," he grunted. The bartender, a retired detective, served him without a word, his expression unreadable. As Thorne took a long swallow, his eyes fell on the corkboard by the jukebox, a collage of department memos and inside jokes. Pinned right in the center was the still image from the diner. Someone had taken a black marker and drawn a little clown crown on his head. Scrawled beneath it were the words, "Employee of the Month." He ripped the picture from the board, crumpled it in his fist, and stormed out, the burn of humiliation hotter than any whiskey. He was no longer one of them. He was a liability, a joke, and the man who had made him this way was still out there, silent, watching. The pressure was becoming unbearable. Friday, the paranoia and isolation had boiled over into a toxic brew of rage and desperation. Thorne was done hiding. He was done waiting for the other shoe to drop. He was going to find Statham. He was going to finish this on his own terms. He wasn't a cop anymore in that moment. He was just a cornered animal. He grabbed his gun, the cold steel a comforting weight in his hand, and headed for his car. He knew where to go. He was being drawn back to the scene of his crime, to the Iron Skillet Diner. The sun was setting as he pulled into the parking lot, casting long, dramatic shadows. The diner glowed with a warm, inviting light, looking deceptively peaceful. Thorne pushed through the door, his heart hammering against his ribs, his hand resting on the grip of his weapon. And there he was. Jason Statham sat in the exact same booth, a cup of tea steaming before him. He looked up as Thorne entered, his expression one of serene patience. It wasn't a coincidence. It was an appointment. "Marcus," Statham said, his voice calm, as if greeting an old friend. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Thorne's throat went dry. You set this up." "I didn't have to," Statham replied, taking a slow sip of his tea. Bullies always return to the scene of their power. It's where they feel safest. It's where they're most vulnerable. He placed the cup down gently. "This was never a coincidence, officer. It was a character test. And you failed." Thorne's hand tightened on his gun. "You think you can play games with me?" Statham raised a single finger, a simple, commanding gesture. "Draw that weapon, and this ends very differently for you. And much more publicly." He tilted his head slightly. "Look around." Thorne's eyes darted around the diner. And then he saw it. The other patrons weren't just patrons. A man in a booth nearby wasn't reading a menu. He was adjusting a small, high-definition camera resting on it. The couple in the corner weren't on a date. They were a sound crew, a boom mic discreetly angled towards their table. Behind the counter, the friendly waitress was gone. In her place stood a sharp, impeccably dressed woman with eyes that missed nothing. "Officer Thorne," the woman said, her voice carrying a cool authority. "My name is Isabella Rossi. I'm a civil rights attorney." She gestured to the cameras. "We're filming a documentary. It's called Below the Line, a look into public accountability and the abuse of authority. You are our star exhibit." Thorne's world tilted on its axis. He was trapped. He turned back to Statham, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. You did all this?" "I gave you a chance," Statham said, his voice low and even. "A chance to walk away. A chance to apologize. A chance to be a better man." He stood up slowly. "You chose this path." Cornered and exposed, Thorne's mind snapped. The last vestiges of reason fled, replaced by pure primal rage. The gun was useless now, a prop in a play he no longer controlled. He abandoned it, lunging across the short distance between them with a guttural roar, his fists swinging in a wide, clumsy arc aimed at Statham's jaw. It was the move of a brawler, fueled by panic. Statham, in contrast, moved with the lethal precision he was famous for. He didn't meet force with force. He simply sidestepped the punch, the fist whistling past his ear. As Thorne's momentum carried him forward, Statham's hand shot out, not to strike, but to guide. He caught Thorne's outstretched arm, his fingers locking onto the wrist. What followed was not a fight. It was a physics lesson. With a single, fluid twist, Statham used Thorne's own weight and momentum against him. There was a sharp, surprised grunt from the officer as his balance evaporated. Statham pivoted, turning Thorne's body, controlling him completely. It was effortless, a masterclass in control, the kind of practical, devastatingly effective technique honed through years of disciplined training. No high kicks, no flashy moves. Just pure, undeniable dominance. He spun Thorne around and propelled him forward. The trajectory was horribly, poetically familiar. Thorne stumbled, his arms flailing, his eyes wide with the sudden realization of where he was headed. The impact was a sickening, wet thud. Officer Marcus Thorne landed face first on the table of the very same booth. Food. This time, a plate of mashed potatoes and gravy splattered outwards. The angle was identical. The humiliation was a perfect mirror image of his own crime. Only this time, the hands guiding the fall belonged to justice. Thorne lay there, groaning, the breath knocked out of him, the taste of gravy and defeat in his mouth. The camera zoomed in, capturing every detail. Statham stood over him, not with triumph, but with a quiet finality. He leaned down, his voice a low, private whisper meant only for Thorne's ears, though the mic on his shirt would capture it for the world. "I'm not going to sue you, Marcus. I'm not going to press charges," he said. He straightened up, his posture immaculate. He gestured to the silent, recording cameras, to the wide-eyed attorney, to the world that was now watching. Because this is enough. He then did the most powerful thing he could. He adjusted the cuff of his Henley shirt, gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to Ms. Rossi, and walked away, leaving Thorne stewing in the wreckage of his own making. He had reclaimed his dignity not by inflicting pain, but by holding up a mirror to the man who had tried to steal it. The footage was a nuclear bomb detonated in the heart of the internet. Within hours, the diner reckoning was the #1 trending topic worldwide. This wasn't just a clip of a cop getting his comeuppance. It was a perfectly orchestrated piece of theater, a narrative of poetic justice, so complete it felt scripted. The synced footage from the documentary crew and the diner's own security cameras provided a 360-degree view of Thorne's downfall. The fallout was absolute. The mayor called it a necessary and public cleansing. The police union, which had initially offered a tepid defense, now issued a statement condemning Thorne's rogue behavior and severing all ties. He was officially fired via sterile email. His badge and weapon were collected by a junior officer who wouldn't make eye contact. The online commentary evolved. The initial glee and memes gave way to a deeper conversation. Statham didn't just win a fight. One top comment read, "With millions of likes, he taught a masterclass in control." Another said, "The real power move wasn't the takedown. It was the silence that came before it." A week later, Jason Statham was back at the Iron Skillet. Same booth, same order. The owner, a kind-faced woman named Maria, brought him his plate. "This is on the house, Mr. Statham," she whispered. He gave her a polite nod. "Thank you, Maria, but it's not necessary." "What you did," she started, then hesitated. "It meant something to us. To see someone stand up like that." Statham looked up from his meal, his gaze thoughtful. "Sometimes the loudest statement is silence," he said quietly, "and the strongest muscle is restraint." As for Thorne, his life was over. He moved to another state, but his face was unforgettable. Every job interview ended with a polite but firm, "We'll be in touch," after the inevitable Google search. At a gas station, a teenager smirked and tossed a packet of wet wipes at him. "For your face," the kid had snickered. The humiliation was a ghost that followed him everywhere. One afternoon, a final letter arrived. Same plain envelope. Inside, a folded paper with a single sentence. This wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. There was no signature. None was needed. Thorne stared at the note for a long time. He didn't tear it up. He didn't throw it away. He walked to his closet and opened a shoebox. Inside lay his confiscated badge, his empty holster, and a neatly folded uniform he could never wear again. He placed the note inside with the relics of his dead career. The world eventually moved on. But for one man, the lesson was permanent. Every time Marcus Thorne looked in the mirror, he no longer saw a cop. He saw the man who had to be publicly broken to understand that respect is a currency you earn, not a toll you demand. The world saw a bully get what he deserved. But what happens when the cameras aren't there? What does true respect look like in your daily life? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, so please comment with respect. If this story resonated with you, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to see it, and make sure you subscribe for more stories about justice in unexpected places.